Good morning. Welcome to the Deep 404. I will just start today with a little bit of an update on the attack on the US base yesterday in Syria, Jordan. There has been some interesting change in the messaging since this first came out. So when about a day ago this first came out, the reports were that the attack occurred in Jordan. They occurred on an American base known as Tower 22. Subsequent to that, reports came out from Joe Biden and Lloyd Austin, where they spoke about the attacks in Jordan having taken place. As the day wore on, this changed to become Syria, and the attacks occurred on the Tanf base in Syria. I'll just show on the map here. So you can see here on the top in the pink area is Syria. Below that is Iraq. This map is showing that the Tanf base is within Syria. Tower 22 sits inside Jordan, but looks like it may be right on the border. It seems as though Tower 22 is a supply base for the larger Tanf. There might have been about 350 American soldiers within the Tanf base at this time. They may or may not actually be connected, but they are separated. So I think this explains at least something to do with the messaging. It sounds as though the attack may have occurred on Tower 22, which is actually in Jordan, but connected to the Tanf base, which is in Syria. Either way, the messaging, it's interesting the way that it's changed. I must admit, I don't understand entirely what the implications of this may be, moving the messaging from the attack having happened in Jordan, if it was on Tower 2, which is in Jordan, to in Syria. In Syria, the Tanf base in Syria is considered to be an illegal base, and the Americans shouldn't by rights be there. So one would have thought that perhaps having an attack on a base in Jordan, where they were meant to be, would have been a better sounding story, but it has now become clear that people are talking about it being in Tanf. 3 servicemen were reportedly killed. And again, the way that messaging changes, earlier yesterday, the reports that came out talked about possibly 25 wounded, and then it was 34. And I saw reporting suggesting that there were 34 people suffering traumatic brain injury. As I mentioned, that's an unusual term. It's a term that has been used in recent attacks on American bases. Some people are suggesting that it is being used as a cover to represent people who have actually been killed, that they have suffered traumatic brain injury. That is true. They're not lying, but they haven't gone far enough as to say these people have actually been killed. I don't know. I can't prove that at this stage. But it's an unusual term that's starting to be used in these situations, and there are certainly people speculating that that's what it means, and that of these multiple attacks that have occurred on US bases in Iraq and Syria over the last 2 or 3 months, that there have been people killed, American servicemen killed, that have not been reported. John Helmer's Dancing with Bears website, I think it was, actually about a month ago, was reporting this, and that this was being covered up, and that the Lloyd Austin story was just a smokescreen to try and cover up what was happening with the attacks in these bases. I don't know about that one. We'll find out. In terms of a response, there was yesterday some thought that may be being prepared, and that there may have been some preparation steps detected by people who use Flight Radar. Someone had suggested to me that I take a look at Flight Radar 24. I have done that, and it's actually quite interesting being able to track planes of different types. I'm not sponsoring them. They're not a sponsor of mine. But it is an interesting website. And there were a bunch of large tankers, American tankers, flying up out of Riverside March Air Reserve Base in California, KC-135s. There were about 7 of them that took off. And again, I was reading about this, and some people speculating that those air tankers, which are for refueling jets, may be making their way to Middle Eastern area bases, where just prior to the US retaliation being taken for these strikes. Now, these strikes have reportedly been carried out by Iranian-backed militia groups, that the Americans, it's expecting some sort of counter strike if they enact a sizable strike on Iranian groups. That these tankers may be sent to in preparation to allow the Americans to get their very expensive and precious F-35s and F-16s and that sort of thing up off the ground where they're easier targets, static targets, and into the air. They may conduct the attack, but they may actually get more of them into the air in case there are reprisal attacks from the Iranian militia groups. Or Iran, perhaps, is what they are suggesting. I don't know if Iran's going to go that far just yet. But the idea is that the exodus of these 7 tankers would be to enable more of those Air Force assets to be off the ground and in the air should there be reprisal attacks on the bases where they're held. That may or may not be the case, but does make some sense. And as I say, Flight Radar 24, it is an interesting website to have a play with if you haven't seen it before. There are a number of unsubstantiated reports coming out around a number of topics today. One of them is General Valeri Zaluzhny, the commander of the Ukrainian ground forces. Has he been relieved of his post? Now, there has been talk that this was coming for some weeks now. There have been reports that President Zelensky of Ukraine has previously sent aides to Zaluzhny to say, stand down. Zaluzhny said, no, I won't stand down. I've done a great job. If you want to fire me, you can fire me and then deal with the fallout of that. I've done a video previously talking about this and the likelihood that this might lead to a military coup, given the fact that General Zaluzhny appears to have good support from the military. President Zelensky doesn't. General Zaluzhny would be able to, you would imagine, within his own forces, spread the story that, look, the cause of our losses and failure and the fact that you're at the front line fighting and not with your family and this isn't over is because of the direction I've had to take from Zelensky. It's not been my fault, it's been his. And there is that old quote that if there's a coup going on, I bet on the guy with the tanks. So General Zaluzhny could be the guy with the tanks if that did happen. Now, I haven't seen reports that a coup has started up, but I have seen a number of reports. One is allegedly from a former Verkhovna Rada MP, which is the Verkhovna Rada is the Ukrainian parliament, Borislav Bereza. He has reported this. I haven't seen anything confirmed, but there does seem to be a bubbling up of this event having happened, and there has certainly been lead up to this over the last few days. It wouldn't be surprising if this were to happen for President Zelensky. It allows him to create some sort of a scapegoat, someone that he can blame military failures on. Talk is that Kirilo Budanov, the head of the GRU, the Military Intelligence Directorate, has been selected by Zelensky to be Zaluzhny's successor. I guess we'll wait and see if such a thing does happen. He reportedly has been selected due to the thought that the Ukrainian inability to go on the offensive anymore may lead them into adopting defensive positions and insurgency tactics, where they'll try to insert sabotage groups into Russia, and that will be the focus, and that would be something that Kirilo Budanov could manage. That's in his wheelhouse. And also that given his military intelligence, he would be able to keep tabs on all of the generals for President Zelensky. If the idea of a coup was starting to raise up, he would become aware of that. That's the reasoning that's been given by some people as to why Budanov might be selected for the role if this happens. There are also talks coming out about both Romania and Hungary looking to want to reclaim areas of Ukraine. In Romania, the talk is around the Bukovina area. Where are we? Here. So this is... I'll just hide me for a second there. A map, you can see Ukraine in the center, Poland, Slovakia and Hungary off the left, Romania there at the bottom, and Bukovina area, which is highlighted in orange, which straddles Ukraine and Romania. Sorry. Prior to 1947, the Bukovina area that are now in Ukraine were considered to be part of Romania. And the leader of the Romanian Unity Alliance, the AUR party, Claudiu Tăziu, has called for annexation of Bukovina. So this, as a result of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, the USSR claimed the northern half of Bukovina from Romania in 1940. And in 1940, that was annexed by the Soviet Union. Nazi Germany held it for a little while until about 1940, from 1941 to 1944. And then in 1947, Romania was forced to secede it back to the USSR. And so that top part of Bukovina was moved into what was Ukraine. There is also talk that Hungary may be interested in claiming the territory of Transcarpathia. So this is Transcarpathia area here, just above Romania, Hungary and Slovakia. So similar sort of area around, around this region here, Slovakia, Hungary. The Transcarpathia area runs down to around this Bukovina area. Here, the leader of the Hungarian Our Motherland Party, Laszlo Torokai, has suggested that Hungary will claim the territory of Transcarpathia if, as a result of the conflict with Russia, the statehood of Ukraine ceases to exist. Reportedly, in March of 2022, the Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk accused the Hungarian authorities of trying to achieve the transfer, and Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó noted that Budapest would be ready, if necessary, to take measures to rescue and protect Hungarians living in the Transcarpathian region. The area was traditionally, or historically I should say, part of the Hungarian crown before it was detached from the Kingdom of Hungary and attached to the newly created Czechoslovakia in 1918, and then formally confirmed in about 1920. Then between 1945 and 1946, it was ceded into Soviet Ukraine, and so that area became part of Ukraine. There have also been reports made, I believe these were perhaps suggested by Dmitry Medvedev, the Deputy Secretary of the Russian Security Council and former President of Russia, that he was suggesting that Ukraine should be wary of any offerings by Poland to insert Poland's troops into Ukraine to provide security and protection and assistance for Ukraine, as he suggested that Poland, if Ukraine were to be weakened, would look to capture some of the western oblasts and take those back as Polish territory. So Ukraine in a very, very delicate, dangerous position at the moment, where if they do lose enough power, if they do seem to be weakened and the statehood of Ukraine is really questioned, perhaps if Russia takes the oblasts of Odessa and Mykolaiv and shuts off what remains of Ukraine from port access to the Black Sea, that these other nations are beginning to smell blood, sense the weakness in Ukraine, and are starting to rise the possibility within their own nations that they could and that they perhaps should reclaim land that they could historically claim as being their own, given that there's going to be no one controlling Ukraine. And if they still have people ethnically tied to their own nations living in these regions, which, given that they're on their borders, you would think they might, that it would be, in fact, their duty to retake this land to protect the ethnically aligned citizens they have within those areas. So that's what's being starting to be discussed, it seems, in some of the opposition parties in Romania and Hungary at this stage. Speaking of Hungary, it seems as though the EU has really had enough of Viktor Orban and his vetoing of the additional aid package of 50 billion euros to be given to Ukraine by the EU. Viktor Orban has said that he wants some governance over this. He wants to understand where the money's going, what it will be spent on, what it will be used for, and perhaps even what has happened to some of the previous money that they have provided to Ukraine. He has concerns that it is being corruptly siphoned off. There has been moves by the EU to remove Hungary's veto power, their voting power. And there is an article in the EU terms or constitution, Article 7, which means that they can do something like this. But there are reports now that the EU has announced that it will work to stop funding Hungary if Hungary vetoes this bill of which would enable the $50 billion to go to Ukraine over the next 3 years. So we can see how this conflict is creating challenges, within the EU. The leader of Slovakia, Robert Fico, he is supportive of Hungary's position. He himself isn't looking to veto the funding going to Ukraine, but is supportive of Viktor Orban and has said that he would vote against and would not support the stripping of Hungary's veto powers from the EU. This is the challenge with a democratic voting system here, is that if you allow voting to have the veto power so that everyone in your organisation has the ability to say no to a particular thing, then this could happen. Someone can veto something the rest of you want to do, and you're then stymied effectively. Or you start to pull back on the tenets of the democratic voting system that you have, where you say, oh, well, you can veto some of the time, as long as most of us decide that it's okay for you to veto. It's kind of the situation you end up in. And that seems to be what's happening here with Hungary. In the Middle East, there are, again, on the topic of unconfirmed reports, but reports which seem to be gaining a lot of traction online. There are reports that the Houthis in Yemen may have struck the Lewis B. Puller, it's a marine ship, I believe, with a missile. There is a claim from Yahya Sarera that his comment is, with the help of Allah, Yemeni naval forces in the Yemeni armed forces have launched a suitable naval missile towards the US naval Lewis B. Puller vessel in the Gulf of Aden. The boat itself is an unusual looking boat. If you haven't got a picture of it here, but if you look it up, it's an unusual looking boat. It does look like it could do with a paint job at the moment, but it's unconfirmed at this stage by the US that this attack has occurred, but reports from the Houthis, and again, it's picking up legs in sort of social media where people are starting to talk about this. Whether it is true or not, I don't know, but there is reportedly this announcement from the Houthis themselves saying that they were able to strike it with a missile. No claim that it has been sunk. Given the unusual design of the boat, it's possible, I could imagine, that a missile has struck it and may have done some damage depending on the size and power of the missile, and that you may not even notice it if you were to see pictures of the boat. It has a lot of large open compartments on its side. This could hide a missile strike, which may have happened in the interior of the boat. I don't know. It's not been confirmed yet. And just one thing, I've only got limited time this morning, so it's only a short update. But Africa seems to be becoming a huge win for Russia. So Russia has this week gifted 25,000 tons of free wheat to Burkina Faso. So that has been in the news. And Russia is obviously really making efforts within Africa to build relationships with nations, and it seems to be working. In Niger, where the French have just been evicted after the coup last year, there are reports of growing military and economic ties between Russia and Niger. the Central African Republic. The reports from there are that the Central African Republic is setting aside land and an area to be developed into barracks for 10,000 Russian soldiers. They would like to have a military presence from the Russians in their country to provide them with some sort of protection. The capital, Ouagadougou of Burkina Faso, it suffered 2 military coups last year. And since then, there have been increased talks with the Russians, which has led to this 25,000 tonnes of free wheat. They have, with the new leadership there, they have moved away from France. This has happened to a number of nations in Africa where France is being sort of pushed out, it seems. The US along with them in some of these nations. And Russia, last year, a African-Russian summit was held in St. Petersburg with Mali, the Central African Republic, Eritrea, Somalia, and Zambia making up members of the group. Also, African delegation had travelled to Russia, looking to be able to sort of help to broker some peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. So Russia definitely sensing the opportunity that is being created as these nations grow in strength enough to be able to challenge occupiers in their land, like, for example, the French, who have had a long history of colonisation in Africa, and the American forces, and now looking to turn to partner with other nations that can provide them with economic or military assistance or benefit. And Russia seems to be being very successful in the moment, along with China as well in this region. But it seems that Russia is really leading the way at the moment. Okay, I've got limited time today, so I'll leave that there for today. But I hope you are enjoying the channel, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.